when I was in the seminary in undergraduate school, for some reason, I don't know why, we watched this movie, and I don't remember what it was called, the name of it, but this movie was about the death of the Pope and the election of his successor. And in the movie, the dying Pope designated a nun to be his successor, and at the end of the movie, the cardinals, they can't agree on a vote, and so they fulfilled the Pope's wishes by electing this nun as the next Pope. And of course, we all rolled our eyes, and we had the same reaction. You know, this is Hollywood's dream of what the church is actually like. It's what it should be like, but it's actually completely unrealistic. It's impossible. It will never happen, and it could never happen. But when I heard Cardinal Prevost's name on Thursday, I had kind of the same feeling as I did at the end of that movie. It seemed like a movie. It was that unrealistic, and I'm not even exaggerating. So when I said last week about the odds of an American being elected to Pope are less than 1%, I think everybody else agreed with me. But in my defense, I was thinking the chances of a cardinal living in America, like Cardinal Tobin or Supich or Cardinal Dolan, those guys literally have 0% chance of being Pope. They're too American. And I'm sure that plenty of Americans were rooting for an American Pope, thinking, why not the United States for a change? It's been in Europe for a long time, or it was in South America last time, why not North America? But for a guy like me and basically every other priest and bishop who are more familiar with how the church operates than your average Catholic, an American Pope is borderline unthinkable. If you just go to the diocesan YouTube page and you see Bishop Conley's reaction, all he could say was, "It's the American, it's the American." That should tell you something. The real reason there has never been an American Pope is that up until Thursday, it was conventional wisdom that the Pope should never come from a nation that was also a political or a military superpower, that it would simply be too much influence from a single nation, which I think is why the only American-born cardinal that was actually could possibly ever be elected was Cardinal Prevost, because he spent most of his entire priesthood really outside of the U.S. He is a missionary. If you listen to his homily from yesterday morning, where he spoke to the cardinals in the Sistine Chapel in his first Mass as Pope, I highly recommend you listen to it. It's one of the best homilies from a Pope I've heard in decades. He even had a Spanish accent in his English. So he identifies himself as a native of Peru, probably more than America. He has been ministering in Peru since before I was even born, and that much was clear, that this is the most important part of his priesthood was not in the United States. When he had to fight back tears when he addressed the people of his diocese from the balcony of St. Peter's on Thursday. And I think that is the reason why this was a wise choice on the part of the cardinals. He is familiar with North America, he's familiar with South America, and he's familiar with Rome, and he's a good administrator. And so in terms of his work as a priest, Pope Leo is a citizen of the world. He doesn't belong to any one nation, which is the perfect description of the church. It is universal. It belongs to all and is the property of none. The Latin word for pope is pontifex, which means bridge builder. And that's now Pope Leo's role within the church, to build bridges, to be a symbol of unity from the poorest of the poor in the developing world to the wealthiest nations on earth. And I'm excited to see what he'll do in the next 15 to 20 years. Now, tomorrow morning, we will have our annual Baccalaureate Mass for our 4 seniors, and I'm as equally as excited for them as I am for the new Pope. So we have Aislinn and Savannah and Tayton and Jaden who will be sitting in the front row tomorrow. The rest of this homily is going to be for them, and I didn't feel like... I already wrote a second homily for St. Germanus, because they don't have their graduation until next week. I didn't feel like writing a third homily for you guys, so you get the Baccalaureate Mass homily. We hear it said in a million different ways, from the traditional media, social media, the internet, all around us. We hear it said that the world we live in is a terrible place, that things seem to be getting far worse quicker than they're getting better. We hear that the future looks pretty bleak. But I will say to our graduates, rather than see the world around you as an unfortunate circumstance in which you have entered into adulthood, see this moment in your lives for what it really is. That this is the time that God had intended for you. Since before you existed, God knew that you would be made for this moment. And we cannot use the state of the world as an excuse to be hopeless, because hope is free. The world does not have to be perfect in order for you to be kind and compassionate. It takes a lot of energy to be hateful. It takes a lot of energy to be mean-spirited, but it costs us nothing to be kind. And when you feel like you've been kind enough to others, I urge you to go even further than you thought possible. The world does not have to be perfect in order for you to listen to others. The world does not have to be perfect for you to make a difference for the people around you. You don't have to wait for those things to happen. We can do them right now. For the remainder of our time here today, I'm going to turn to the new Pope, Pope Leo, and to some of the historical figures that served as his influences, and go to them for some tidbits of advice that we can take with us, that our graduates can take with them into college. This advice has been proven over centuries to be words of truth that are worth going back to. The first figure of influence, the most obvious one in Pope Leo's life, was the last Pope Leo, Pope Leo XIII. Leo XIII was Pope from 1878 to 1903, and he wrote one of the most important documents in church history titled Rerum Novarum. And in this document, Pope Leo XIII discusses the changing world with the Industrial Revolution and the beginning of Marxism and communism. And in this document, Leo XIII emphasizes concepts that were relatively new to the world at this point, concepts like the individual rights of workers and religious freedom, individual rights of citizens, the value of private property, the value of limiting the size and the scope of government. He outright denounced Marxism for its fundamentally atheist foundations, which undermined the inherent value of the individual as being created in the image of God. In the same document, Leo XIII denounced forms of capitalism which prey upon the working class and favor only the wealthy. And so this document, written in 1891, serves and still serves as the outline and the structure for the entire body of the Church's teaching on social, economic, and political issues. And since Leo XIII, several other popes have contributed to this deposit of social thought: Pope Pius XI, Pope John XXIII, Pope Paul VI, John Paul II, Benedict XVI, Pope Francis. And here's some advice from Pope Leo XIII, all the way back in 1891, from this document, Rerum Novarum. He wrote, "The socialists, therefore, in setting aside the parent and the family and setting up a state supervision, act against natural justice and destroy the structure of the home." Here, the Pope addresses the long-standing goal of Marxism, in which the government replaces the church and replaces the family as the support system for every individual. And so, I'll say this to the seniors tomorrow morning: please take this advice. Do not surrender your thought to politicians. If you find your political heroes saying things that are directly in contradiction to the clear teaching of Jesus Christ, maybe we should change who our heroes are. We need to think on our own. We need to turn to the people that love and care about us for actual advice, because I promise you that the government does not care about you. Don't let the powers that be separate you from the people that actually do care about you. And never let your mistakes or your differences separate you from the people that love you, even if you disagree with them on some things. And I want to also extend this idea that Pope Leo proposes to this sort of class warfare that we've been indoctrinated into by the media and by our politicians. We are told by lots and lots of people that we are in a battle against the rich and the poor, against the old and the young. It is a really popular thing at the moment, especially on social media, to pit the different generations against each other. Boomers and us millennials get hate from the younger generations. Gen Z is blamed by older generations for not doing things the right way, or at least not doing things the way that they did. We need to stop that. We need to stop dismissing somebody because they are poorer or richer or older or younger. Because we can't improve a single thing, not a single thing, about our lives by blaming somebody else or by arguing about who is wrong and who is right. But we can maybe come to some understanding by listening and talking. Not to politicians or people on Facebook, but to the individual people in our lives that matter. Think of the decades of experience that the generations before us have and how valuable that is. Times are different now than they were when they were our age, but that's always been the case. But listen to them when it comes to things like love and heartache and sin and forgiveness. Listen to them when they talk about how to find happiness or how to handle suffering. The human condition remains the same as it always has, and dismissing those who have more life experience than you do is a very foolish thing to do. I'm going to interject something not from Pope Leo, but my favorite band, I guess I'll leave their name out of it, but one of the final line in one of their songs talks about this very thing. And here's the lyrics. Maybe we swap out what it was that we hold so high. Find your grandparents or someone of age. Pay some respect for the path that they paved, to life they were dedicated. Now that should be celebrated. Another significant Pope Leo was Pope Leo I, also known as Pope Leo the Great, who was Pope from the year 440 to the year 461. Leo the Great is famous for theologically defending the person of Jesus. We still use the exact wording that he proposed to the church in the year 451 to describe the person of Jesus, that he is one person with two natures. And Pope Leo the Great also famously met the barbarian hordes of Attila the Hun at the gates of Rome and negotiated with him. And in that act of bravery, Rome was saved from being looted and ransacked and destroyed. And so, like Pope Leo I, we need conviction like that in today's church. Just this past week, I think it was this last week, maybe the week before, the governor of Washington state signed into law a bill that requires priests to break the seal of confession by reporting what they hear in the confessional to the authorities. That is a violation of basic religious freedom. It is a violation of the truth of the gospel. Priests will go to jail for this, for upholding the teaching of the church. And now is the time that we've been given. Now is the time that we have been given to voice the convictions of what we believe and to follow the example of Pope Leo the Great, to meet those who disagree with us with our convictions and face them face to face. And our current Pope Leo, yesterday in his homily yesterday morning, which I once again highly recommend you listen to a translation of it or you read through it. It is brilliantly written and brilliantly said. But he addressed this very thing to the cardinals in this homily yesterday morning. He said, "Even today, there are many settings in which the Christian faith is considered absurd, meant for the weak and the unintelligent, settings where other securities are preferred, like technology, money, success, power, or pleasure. These are contexts where it is not easy to preach the gospel and bear witness to its truth, where believers are mocked, opposed, despised, or at best tolerated and pitied. Yet precisely for this reason, these are the places where our missionary outreach is desperately needed. A lack of faith is often tragically accompanied by the loss of meaning of life, the neglect of mercy, appalling violations of human dignity, the crisis of the family, and so many other wounds that affect our society. In other words, we should expect our faith to be mocked and to be treated with false pity. If we truly live our faith, expect to be called unscientific or uneducated. Expect to be called backward or weak. Expect to be expected, especially you young people, to prioritize sex and money and power and fame and technology and comfort. These are the things that the world values as most important at the moment. And it has all led to an unprecedented rate, as the Pope says, of depression, anxiety, hopelessness, meaninglessness in life, and a mental health crisis. Focusing entirely on materialistic things, surface level things, superficial things, rather than the deep meaning of the human person and the deep experience of life, the deep meaning of suffering, the need to serve the people around us, all of that has led us to the highest suicide rates in history. It's not working. We need to rather connect to people and not things, to love people and not things, to serve people and not things. If you base your self-worth on how much fun you have or the things that make you feel good temporarily, then you will become a slave of those things that do not last. And I can offer you, just personally speaking, without going into any great detail, 42 years of life experience, right? Know for a fact that the emptiest you will ever feel is when you try to fill your heart with temporary things. The loneliness you will ever be is when your life becomes about serving yourself. So if you only remember one thing I tell you today, remember that the happiest you will ever be is when you are serving somebody else. There's one last person that we can take advice from today, and that is St. Augustine. So our new pope belongs to a group within the Catholic Church called the Augustinians, and they're a group of priests from across the world that live by the teachings of St. Augustine, who was a bishop in northern Africa during the late 4th and early 5th centuries, and he was prolific in his writings. We have most of his writings down to this day. I had a teacher in the seminary, Father Pisarczyk. He's the short Polish guy who pumped a lot of iron and drank a little too much scotch, but he would always complain about St. Augustine. He would say, there's not a combination of words that St. Augustine didn't feel the need to write down, because he was a professor and he had to read all this stuff. But anyways, St. Augustine is perhaps most famous for writing what is thought to be the first ever autobiography, which was titled The Confessions. And he tells the story of his conversion. St. Augustine lived as a pagan as a young man. He was entirely self-serving. He was addicted to the pleasures of this world, power, money, luxury, sex. And all the while, his Christian mother, St. Monica, prayed for his conversion. And here is what St. Augustine writes about his conversion to Christianity and how his whole life he was actually seeking God, whether he realized it or not. He sought God in all the material things that he was chasing, but he was left feeling unfulfilled. And so I want to leave you with this quote where Augustine is speaking to God. Late have I loved you, O beauty ever ancient, ever new, late have I loved you. You were within me, but I was outside, and it was there that I searched for you. In my unloveliness, I had longed and plunged into the lovely things that you created. You were with me, but I was not with you. Created things kept me from you, yet if they had not been in you, they would not have been at all. They would not have been at all. You called, you shouted, and you broke through my deafness. You flashed, you shone, and you dispelled my blindness. You breathed your fragrance on me, and I drew breath in from you. I have tasted you, and now I hunger and thirst for more. You touched me, and I burned for your peace. As our seniors move on to the rest of their lives, they will have to find God for themselves. There will be nobody there to hold their hand or to make them pray or to go to church. It's now a choice that they have to make. But what they should know, and what we must teach them, is that no matter where life or life's choices take them, they are never too far from God to be loved by Him. If they find themselves wondering, how did I get here? Or how did I end up in this relationship? If they find themselves not being able to have certain conversations with family, tell them to go to a priest. If they find themselves not really loving the person they see in the mirror, please tell them that they are loved and it's never too late to turn back. Late have I loved you, O beauty ever ancient, ever new. Late have I loved you. You were within me, but I was outside. You were with me, but I was not with you. You called, you shouted, and you broke through my deafness. You flashed, you shone, and you dispelled my blindness. You touched me, and I burned for your peace.